Prologue: Whispers of a Vanished Legion. Throughout the centuries, stories have circulated about a great Persian army that marched into the desert, only to disappear without a trace. The Greek historian Herodotus and other ancient chroniclers wrote of entire divisions lost to storms of sand, never to be seen again. Tradition often attributes this event to Cambyses Sichid, son of Cyrus the Great, who allegedly lost 50,000 men in the western desert of Egypt while attempting to punish the oracle of Amun at Siwa. Yet, a parallel legend sometimes references Xerxes I, the famous king who led invasions of Greece decades after Cambyses, as having also sent forces into barren wastelands, never to return. From a strictly historical standpoint, Cambyses' ill-fated expedition is far more commonly attested. Still, references mixing Xerxes into the story have popped up in certain medieval and modern reinterpretations, conflating these two Persian monarchs. Were these legends about Xerxes simply a misattribution of Cambyses' tragedy? Or were there indeed separate, lesser-known Persian forces under Xerxes that vanished, fueling confusion among later historians? This article ventures into that realm of uncertainty, examining the origins of the missing army narrative, the difficulty in separating legend from reality, and how Xerxes' name came to be enmeshed in these haunting tales. Along the way, we revisit archaeological clues, modern investigations, and the shifting sands of the desert itself. Whether the tale belongs to Xerxes or Cambyses, the possibility of a mighty host consumed by the elements remains one of antiquity's most compelling enigmas. Chapter 1. Setting the stage: Persia's ambitions in Egypt from Cyrus to Xerxes. The Achaemenid Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great around the mid-6th century BCE, rapidly expanded to include the vast territories of Mesopotamia, Asia Minor, and beyond. Cyrus's son, Cambyses II, continued that expansion by conquering Egypt around 525 BCE. He established Persian rule along the Nile, a rule that would persist intermittently for over a century, surviving various revolts. When Xerxes I assumed the throne in 486 BCE, he inherited not only the Persian Empire's extraordinary breadth, but also its internal strife and rebellious provinces. Xerxes is best remembered for his campaigns against the Greek city-states, particularly the invasions that included the battles of Thermopylae and Salamis. Yet his dominion included Egypt, where revolts flared sporadically, as local dynasts resented foreign occupation. Maintaining control over the Nile region was crucial for Persian prestige and resources, driving Xerxes to dispatch troops to quell rebellions or to project power further afield. A tale of two armies? In classical sources, we find mentions of a lost Persian army, and more specifically, a rumored doomed march into desert wastes in Egypt or Libya. Typically, these accounts feature Cambyses II, but a few confuse the timeline, citing Xerxes as the king involved in dispatching an expedition that vanished. The question arises, could Xerxes have repeated, on a smaller scale, what Cambyses supposedly attempted decades earlier, only for subsequent authors to conflate or merge both events into a single drama? Chapter 2. Ancient Accounts and Confusions: Herodotus' Version. The earliest and most influential account of a lost Persian army stems from Herodotus, often referred to as the father of history. Writing in the 5th century BCE, Herodotus relates that Cambyses II, emboldened after taking control of Egypt, sent 50,000 men westward from Thebes toward the oasis of Siwa, known then for its oracle of Amun. According to the story, after many days' march, a sudden sandstorm of epic proportions enveloped the troops, and not one man returned. Herodotus does not explicitly blame Xerxes for this catastrophe. Rather, he identifies Cambyses as the monarch responsible. Alternate mentions in later histories. Despite Herodotus' clarity, some later Greek and Roman writers mention a Persian force lost in the sands in a more generalized sense, sometimes attributing it incorrectly to Xerxes. Additionally, medieval scholars, less familiar with the specifics, have occasionally swapped out Cambyses for Xerxes. These misattributions might reflect widespread knowledge of Xerxes' fame in Greek history, especially from the Persian Wars, rather than any well-substantiated historical record. Xerxes was a towering, almost legendary figure in Greek and biblical texts, overshadowing Cambyses, who was lesser known outside specialized circles, oral traditions, and local legends. In certain Egyptian and North African folklore, references to an ancient Persian king who offended a local deity or a revered oracle took root, Whether they meant Cambyses, Xerxes, or a lesser satrap is not always clear. The story of a cursed or hubristic king losing men in the desert is thematically potent. It affirms the power of local gods, warns of overreach, and explains the occasional presence of scattered artifacts or rumors of skeletons half buried in dunes. Over centuries, these oral tales blurred names, forging composite figures that might conflate Xerxes with Cambyses. Chapter 3. A geopolitical context. Why march through the sands? Strategic and religious motivations. Why would Cambyses or Xerxes risk a massive overland expedition through some of the harshest terrain on Earth? Herodotus claims Cambyses wanted to punish the priests of the Oracle of Amun in Siwa, possibly for a prophecy or perceived slight. The Oracle of Amun was influential among local Egyptians and Libyans, so subjugating or chastising the shrine could bolster Persian authority. Alternatively, a punitive expedition against rebellious tribes near the western oasis might have been equally plausible. Xerxes, for his part, had to deal with repeated Egyptian uprisings, so any foray into the desert might aim to suppress outlying communities or challenge Berber forces rumored to lurk beyond immediate Persian control. Hubris and overextension. Greek literature often portrays Persian kings as prone to hubris, excessive pride that leads to downfall. Whether it's Xerxes bridging the Hellespont or Cambyses mocking Egyptian customs, the theme resonates. A mighty ruler, certain of invincibility, pushes too far and meets disaster. A desert march to teach an oracle a lesson or quell distant tribes is consistent with Greek narratives, emphasizing the foolhardy arrogance of Persian monarchs. This perspective might help explain why both Xerxes and Cambyses are sometimes invoked as cautionary tales, each undone by their ambition. Chapter 4. The Desert's Deadly Embrace. Geography of the Western Desert. The desert west of the Nile is vast, stretching from the edge of the fertile valley far into what is now Libya. High temperatures by day, plummeting temperatures by night, and the lack of readily available water make it formidable terrain. To move thousands of troops across it would require logistical excellence. Pack animals or caravans carrying immense quantities of water and supplies. One navigational miscalculation or one surprise sandstorm could decimate an expedition, no matter how well equipped. The reality of sandstorms. Sandstorms in the Sahara can be catastrophically violent, swallowing camps and caravans. Known as Khamsin in Egypt, these storms arise suddenly with fierce winds that carry abrasive sand particles, reducing visibility to near zero and shredding exposed skin. A large, disorganized force could become disoriented, losing contact with supply lines. If the storm lasted long enough, casualties from dehydration, suffocation, and exposure could be near total. Even if a portion of the army survived initially, they might succumb afterward, lost without orientation. Archaeological hints. In the modern era, explorers have periodically claimed to stumble upon bones, arrowheads, or ancient artifacts in remote desert areas, sparking excitement that Cambyses or Xerxes' lost army might have been found. The most notable instance occurred in 1933, when Hungarian explorer Laszlo Almasi, the inspiration for Michael Ondaatje's The English Patient, claimed to have found possible relics of a Persian force. Later expeditions from the 20th and early 21st centuries have similarly reported scattered human remains or Persian-style weaponry. None, however, has produced conclusive, peer-reviewed evidence of an entire army. Additionally, the ephemeral nature of desert conditions, shifting dunes, erosion, and looting, complicates any definitive identification of a centuries-old battlefield or burial site. Chapter 5. Sorting fact from legend. Cambyses versus Xerxes, who really vanished? Scholars generally believe the missing army belongs to Cambyses' sixth alone. Herodotus is our principal source, and no ancient account from Xerxes' own time specifically mentions an entire army disappearing in the desert. Nonetheless, some misinformed or romantic narratives have assigned the story to Xerxes, either by honest confusion or by design, to heighten Xerxes' mythical misfortunes. The question remains, if Xerxes ever marched deeper into Libyan territory or tried to punish far-flung oracles, it's possible a smaller force might have perished under similarly harsh conditions, though no reliable documentation supports that scenario. Why the confusion? Name recognition. Xerxes' name is more prominent in Greek histories, especially due to the Persian Wars. Writers summarizing or sensationalizing history might attach the famous name to lesser-known events. Syncretic legends. Folklore often merges or conflates big personalities. Over time, stories about Cambyses may have simply been retold with Xerxes as the principal figure. Historical shadow. Xerxes overshadowed Cambyses because Cambyses' reign was relatively short and overshadowed by his father's conquests. In contrast, Xerxes' Greco-Persian conflicts shaped a large portion of classical historical writing. Archaeological disappointment. In modern times, the search for the lost Persian army, whether Cambyses, Xerxes, or some ambiguous force, has fascinated explorers and treasure hunters, yet attempts to find large-scale remains, thousands of skeletons, weapons, or mass graves, have so far proven inconclusive. Skeptics argue that wind-blown desert sands in the passing of millennia would likely scatter and decompose most organic material, making any definitive find nearly impossible. Chapter 6. Modern Investigations and Theories. Satellite Imagery. In recent decades, archaeologists and enthusiasts have used satellite technology to analyze remote desert regions. Infrared imaging can detect anomalies in the sand that might hint at buried structures or unnatural disturbances. While some have suggested promising leads, none have yielded definitive evidence tying them to a Persian force from the 6th or 5th century BCE. Alternative explanations. Some historians question whether the entire missing army tale is partially fictionalized. Perhaps Cambyses lost a contingent to desert hazards, but the numbers were smaller than reported. Ancient historians often exaggerated figures for dramatic effect. Others propose that the troops were indeed overwhelmed, but not wholly wiped out, managing to retreat or scatter. Local desert tribes might have attacked or captured them, leading to a more complex fate than a single sandstorm. Still another line of speculation suggests that the lost army might have been a rhetorical or symbolic device by Greek authors, turning a minor defeat into a cosmic moral lesson about divine retribution. Xerxes, Cambyses' successor, naturally became entangled in these retellings, especially for audiences that primarily recognized him from the Persian Wars. Chapter 7. Cultural and Symbolic Resonance. Mythic Morality. Greek historians and storytellers loved moralizing about hubris. A powerful monarch spurns the gods, threatens sacred sites, and receives cosmic punishment. It's a neat narrative. Consequently, the story of a king's entire army swallowed by the desert might well be an allegory emphasizing humility in the face of nature's or the god's power. Whether Cambyses or Xerxes, the lesson stands. No empire, no matter how grand, can overcome the harshest elements when they turn malevolent. Popular imagination. Over the centuries, artists, poets, and novelists have referenced the lost Persian force to evoke the romance of the unknown. Paintings depict swirling deserts where ghostly silhouettes of soldiers march into oblivion. Novels conjure cursed dunes, haunted by the specters of the ancient dead. Even modern cinema occasionally flirts with the concept. Xerxes' name, being historically recognized, often appears in sensationalized versions, bridging the known figure from the Persian Wars with the mystique of a desert catastrophe. Chapter 8. Revisiting the legend. Could Xerxes have dispatched a desert force? A hypothetical scenario. While no classical text explicitly describes Xerxes losing an entire desert army, it's not impossible that he sent smaller detachments into remote areas to quell uprisings or gather intelligence. If one such detachment met disaster, local legends could conflate it with Cambyses' better-attested fiasco. Alternatively, Xerxes might have marched troops through the Nile Valley, but not necessarily far beyond into the western desert. Given the empire's repeated need to maintain control, minor forays might have taken place, leaving minimal records. Limits of evidence. The main problem is the absence of direct proof. Xerxes' inscriptions, the administrative tablets of Persepolis, or Greek historians focusing on Xerxes' Greek campaigns, do not reference a large-scale lost desert expedition. Scholars typically conclude that the storied missing army is either wholly Cambyses' tale or a conflation of smaller, less dramatic events that have been overshadowed by the mesmerizing idea of tens of thousands of warriors swallowed by the sands. Conclusion: a legend echoing through millennia. Whether pinned to Cambyses or erroneously assigned to Xerxes, the missing army legend has captivated imaginations from antiquity to today. The starkness of the narrative, a mighty host undone by nature, resonates with universal themes of human vulnerability and the limits of imperial ambition. While the historical record strongly suggests Cambyses II is the real protagonist of the fiasco, Xerxes' more famous profile contributed to confusion in retellings, weaving him into the tapestry of desert horror and wonder. If a missing force truly did vanish, it stands as one of history's most dramatic reminders that deserts can be as formidable as any battlefield. The possibility that somewhere beneath shifting dunes lie remnants of Persian spears, shattered chariots, and human remains only feeds the legend. At the same time, the lack of definitive archaeological discovery speaks to how ephemeral ancient footprints can be. Over millennia, the desert erases the monuments of empire, leaving only ghost stories, half-remembered texts, and the swirling rumor of an unstoppable storm. For now, the sands keep their secrets. The identity of the king behind the doomed march, Cambyses, Xerxes, or both, remains a puzzle whose solution may lie forever beyond our reach, beckoning explorers, historians, and dreamers to wonder at fate's ultimate hush.